We have repeatedly refuted Armenian lies, Armenian falsifications. We did this at the testimony, at the interviews with the residents of Khojaly, who were subjected to all these torments.
When we were in captivity, we were lined up in rows. Men, including my father, were beaten in front of women and children. My dad's ribs were broken, his teeth were knocked out. It was such torture that it's difficult to even describe. I am sometimes asked what exactly happened in Khojaly that can never be erased from my memory. I answer, the way my father was beaten in front of me. I will never forget it.
The
Khojaly tragedy resonates with pain in the heart of every Azerbaijani. On February 26, 1992, one of the most terrible crimes against humanity in the history of interethnic conflicts took place. Armenian nationalists committed a brutal, bloody massacre of unarmed Azerbaijanis in Khojaly. The Khojaly genocide is one of the events that forever changed the life of an entire nation. And on the anniversary of the Khojaly tragedy, an eyewitness recalls the horrors of those days.
We went outside, and it felt like a rain of fire fell on Khojaly from all sides. The shelling was so intense.
And a military journalist.
The Armenians didn't bother to hide it. They launched an offensive from all sides. Here is their plan for the so-called liberation of Khojaly, drawn up by the criminals themselves.
The murder and expulsion of peaceful Azerbaijanis from their homes, from the land where they lived for centuries, hypocritically called liberation by Armenian criminals, thus giving justification to their atrocities, distorting the facts of history. But we remember what really happened, and we will always remember, so that in the future we will never allow such tragedies to ever happen again. We have learned this lesson well.
89'da gəldik. Ermənilər bizi 89-cu ildə Daşbulaqdan çıxartdı.
In 1989, we moved from Daşbulaq to Khojaly because of the intense shelling by the Armenians. We thought it would be quieter in Khojaly, but alas, I was 9 years old at the time. My father built a bunker-esque structure next to our house. When we heard gunshots, as it was quite common for us, we hid there. We lived like this for 3 years. We didn't have a normal childhood. We couldn't play outside. There was no shelling on the day when the Armenians planned an attack on Khojaly. It seemed strange to all of us. After some time, intense shelling began. Our family hid in a bunker built by my father. A couple of hours later, our neighbor came down to us. She told us that her house had been burned by the Armenian military, and her relatives had been captured. She was the only one who managed to escape. We didn't hear any shots in the bunker, and when we went outside, we were horrified by how Khojaly was being shelled from all directions.
Biz bir vaxt çıxdıq çölə ki, elə bil ki, Xocalıya 4 bir tərəfdən yağış yağadı, o dərəcədə, güllə, boran, bax, o dərəcədə.
The operation was led by their so-called hero commando Arkady Tardivosyan. The first attack took place from the direction of Medyabili. Everything is shown on the map. The second took place from Tazabina, the third from Askran, and the fourth, fifth and sixth direction were from Badara, Bilija and Konkendi. It was from this direction that the 366th Motorized Rifle Regiment of the USSR and the 622nd Chemical Battalion attacked Khojaly.
622-я отдельный батальон противохимической атаки или обороны.
Atam öz bacısını gətirməyə çalışırdı da, qardaşlarım da gəldi.
We had to split up. My father instructed my older sister to run with me to the center of the village, and he went to help our aunt. My sister took my hand. We ran. They were supposed to meet with their friends in the very center of the village. Believe me, we miraculously survived. The bullet almost hit us. We were terrified, and everyone around us was running in wild panic past the bodies of the dead and wounded lying on the ground. Everyone who was able to escape, who was not hit by a bullet, gathered in the center of the village and decided to leave through the forest. There was no other option. They were shooting from all sides.
Hər tərəfdən atırlar. Dedilər ki, elə üst tutaq meşəyə də ayrı yol yoxdur.
Зеленый коридор, по словам армянских
The Green Corridor, according to the Armenian so-called leaders of Karabakh, was a kind of road that ran along the bed of the Gaga River and along the Agdam-Konkendi Railway. Supposedly, people were supposed to pass through from there, and no one would touch them. In numerous interviews, both Vitaly Balasanyan, Serge Sogsyan, and other criminals stated that, allegedly, the people who came from there safely reached the Azerbaijani positions.
И Серж Саркисян и другие преступники заявляли о том, что якобы люди, которые оттуда прошли, они в целости и невредимости вышли на азербайджанские позиции. Но каким-то
But somehow their bodies were later found in the territories controlled by the Azerbaijani armed forces. But that's a lie, a hoax, an attempt to whitewash your actions.
это обман, это попытка, опять-таки повторимся, обелить свое черное имя. Я сейчас на карте покажу, вот мы...
I'll show you on the map we're working on now. You see Khojaly, and the path marked in red, which opens onto the same highway to the bed of the Gaga River.
Путь красным цветом, который выходит на ту самую магистраль и к руслу реки Гаргар.
Meşəyə üst tutduq, həmən o Qarqar çayı deyirəm. Biz o Qarqar çayından keçdik, girdik.
To get into the forest, we had to cross the Gaga River. My sister lifted me onto her back, and the water was icy. And then, just imagine it, after the icy water, everyone, including my sister, walked through the snow. Wet feet, wet trousers, shoes, socks, everything was covered with ice. Of course, we didn't have time to take anything with us. When we left the village, my father told us that our house had been burned down. I know that the 366th Motorized Rifle Regiment took part in this together with Armenian servicemen. I remember how my sister's ice-covered legs swelled up. It was so difficult for her to take every step. They helped us tear these socks off.
Orada mənim bacımın corablarının hamısını ayaq şişdiyinə görə hamısını kəsdi. Belə də cırdılar, ayağından çıxırtdılar ki, yerimək mümkün deyil.
Дальнейший путь
9-year-old Lafkanim Mokhmudova overcame the further path on her own. 32 years ago, a 9-year-old girl with frost-bitten feet got into the lens of military journalist Chingiz Mustafayev, who paid with his own life for the opportunity to convey the truth about Karabakh and Khojaly to the world community. It was she, miraculously saved Lafkanim.
Bir həftəyə yaxın meşədə qaldıq belə. Orada da ağac susuz. Mən də uşağım.
For about a week we hid in the woods, trying to find a way out. We were hungry and thirsty. I cried. My father calmed me down. Because the Armenians were going to kill the crying children, they killed everyone, including children. Someone was taken prisoner. We walked for several days. We couldn't find the way. We climbed to some peak. We saw the light in the houses of Agdam. My father reassured me. You see, we're almost here. So, having lost our way, we found ourselves in an Armenian village. I remember there was a farm there. That's when we realized where we were. We turned back. There was still a long, painful way to go. I remember walking through the snow every step, as if not on a snowy floor, but on broken glass. Traces of those cuts are still on my feet.
Buz elə idi ki, elə bir ki üşüyədi. Doğruyurdu. Bugün də yəni onun izləri hamımızın ayağında var.
Преступления же произошли не только в одном месте, да?
The most interesting thing here is that the crimes occurred not only in one place, in the footage of Chingiz, which we can see in Shelly Mountain, for example. If we look at these red lines, these are the paths along which the residents of Khojaly fled. There were different groups. There were those who took the Agdam Askaran Khojaly Konkendi Lachin gas pipeline as a landmark.
Разные группы были. Были группы, которые за ориентир взяли газопровод Агдам, Аскеран, Khojaly, Konkendi Lachin. Это вот эта группа, которая посередине шла.
There were those who walked along the railway and along the bed of the Gaga River. There were those who walked at the foot of Mount Agedik. There are people who walked as far as Abdul Gulabali in Agdam district. There are also those who have reached Nakhchivanli, Pir Jamal and Aran Zamin, and another group. This small group went in a completely different direction. They went through Tazabina to Bozdak.
Есть, которые дошли до Нахчиванлы, Пир Джамала и Аран Замина. И еще одна группа Это не малочисленная группа. Она в совсем другом направлении. Через Тазябина пошла к Боздагу.
Вне зависимости от того, в каком направлении.
Regardless of which direction the residents of Khojaly fled in an attempt to escape, they all experienced terrible cold and hunger, those among the dead who were not hit by an Armenian bullet. They died of hypothermia instead, they just froze to death, others died of exhaustion. Some were captured.
От истощения. Кого-то взяли в плен.
Bilirsiniz meşə nətər idi. Allaha and olsun, ağappaq qarın üstü deyirdin ki, lalə sərmisən. O dərəcədə qan.
Drops of blood on the snow, a lot of drops, made this snowy forest look like a field with scarlet carnations. Wherever we went, there were bodies of the dead and wounded everywhere. At some point, the shelling started again. We looked around. Everyone was running blindly. After a while, my father saw houses in the distance. He decided that it was Agdam. We went that way, then we heard a shout. Stop! They were Armenians. They surrounded us with machine guns in their hands, then took us to the Bon. That's how we got captured. We met many of our own there, with whom we fled together, whom we lost sight of halfway. Once in captivity, we remembered the days spent in the forest as the best thing that had happened to us in recent times. Because the real torture began in captivity. I've archived some photos. I'll show you what they did to my father. They beat him up. From the beatings, my father's eye leaked out. They knocked out his eye. They didn't look at whether it was man or woman. They didn't spare anyone. We were given neither food nor water. It was impossible to run. There was nowhere to run. Just imagine, everyone is exhausted with frostbitten feet. This is also a photo of my father's legs. An Armenian in a rough boot stepped on my father's bare frostbitten foot, his toes stuck on the shoes of that Armenian. Unbearable pain, unbearable torture. I remember that the children of those Armenians came up to the Bon where they were holding us and looked at us through the window, shouting slurs. They then took weapons from adults and threatened us through the window, forced us to do something, threatening. Everyone had to do what these Armenian children wanted.
Большая часть людей была убита именно близ Аскерана.
Most of the people were killed near Askeran. At the entrance to Askeran, people were killed by the 5th post of illegal armed groups, which was particularly brutal, the 4th post and the Armenian post, which was located at Garagaya.
Который размещался на Гарагая. Кстати, из Гарагая как раз-таки есть вид на Шелле.
By the way, there's a view of Shelly from Garagaya. That is, you can shoot anyone from there with an ordinary firearm, because the distance is short.
Первые выстрелы произошли около горы, около села Кятей.
The first shots were fired near the village of Kartik. People ran away in panic. Some of them ran towards Nakhchivanik, as Armenians call Nakhchivanli. Another part had already gone down to the Gaga riverbed. This group was pursued by this 5th post, up to Nakhchivanli, where the massacre was carried out, and to the area near Askeran, which is considered to be the entrance to Askeran, territorially. Fire support was given them by the 4th post, as we have already said. That is, having found themselves in the crossfire of 2 posts of Armenian illegal armed formations, people started to flee from Garagaya. There they were met by another fire, counter-fire, also by Armenian armed forces. You can say that we have footage of Azerbaijani armed forces meeting the population of Khojaly at Garagaya. This is the February 26, when some self-defense forces of Agdam received information that there was a massacre of civilians in Khojaly, and they had no way to get to Agdam. They attacked Garagaya and liberated one of the points, but this happened in the morning of February 26, when most of the people had already been killed in the area. That's when the first people started coming out there alive and unharmed. The first one was this stream, and before that, people who could seep out near Garagaya, in the direction of Agdam, in the direction of Mount Shelly. They were shot on the spot. That is, the fact is exactly that. The situation in Nakhchivanli is the same. Those who could were killed. and those who could not were taken prisoners and kept in inhuman conditions in a pig farm. The same can be said about Daras. These facts exist, documented facts not only by the Azerbaijani side, but also by international humanitarian structures. The same thing happened in Daras. They were summoned. They said, "Do not be afraid. We are from Akdam." In Azerbaijani language, "We have come to your aid." When people approached, the first group of people were shot. Those who survived were taken hostage and kept in inhuman conditions in animal farms, just like in Nakhchivanli.
Кто выжил, их взяли в заложники и содержали тоже, как и в Нахчыванлы, в нечеловеческих условиях на фермах для животных.
Orada bizi apardılar. Bir həftədən
We were in captivity, in inhuman conditions for a week. Then we were exchanged. God only knows how prisoners, children, adults, women, men were tortured.
əsirlərə onu bir Allah bilir ki, nə zülmlər verdilər. Elə uşağına da, böyüyünə də, qadınına da, kişisinə də.
После страшного изнурительного плена
After enduring terrible, grueling captivity, Lafkanim was taken to the hospital. The doctor brought the girl daffodils, which became a symbol of a new life for the child who survived the horrors of Khojaly. Lafkanim is now 41 years old and her name is Nogiz. This is how the delicate narcissus flower is called in Azerbaijani. 32 years later, now that life is returning to Khojaly, Nogiz Khanim, remembering all the horrors of the Khojaly tragedy, not only prays for the dead, but rejoices at the justice that has triumphed. She dreams that soon she will be able to return home forever to her native, liberated Khojaly.
освобожденный Khojaly.